Okay. Folks, Mike from around the world's with us. Mike, great to have you on the broadcast.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Mike, it's amazing times we're living in. And I guess the first question we have for you, of course, everybody wanted to know, what was it that the 10 days that you were concerned about was going to be happening? And can you jump on that and give us an update?
Yeah, I can. That's an American problem. That 10-day gap, that 10-day period. And it's still, believe it or not, that 10-day period is right here, right now. But for some reason, there have been a lot of attempts to put down quite a few things. If the ball is lost, that means that's going to be almost instantaneous trouble right here in the USA. That's for the USA. And to give you an example of that, there are, of course, you guys know that we have a bit of tension in our country. Many people may not know this, but the tensions have risen to almost a military standard type tension. Let me give you an example. There are, in California alone, of course, during the fires, many people probably noticed militia groups. Of course, they didn't know they were militia groups. And what these guys were doing, where they have appointed themselves security checkpoints in California over certain areas. There are other groups, for example, in Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, they have assembled. And what they're doing is dispatching all these militia groups. We have counter militia groups also that are also being dispatched, organized all throughout the country. And so right now, there are a variety of militia groups that are highly armed. They have, their weaponry is just as potent as law enforcement, if not more. And they're just they're right underneath the radar, but they have assembled. Even the government cannot just go and disband these people, because they have to be careful how they approach them. Number one, they have lost, in the malicious eyes, the government no longer exists. And I don't believe that people are quite aware of that. In other words, you have states right now, you have states that have been organizing and contacting certain key individuals within states, their militias. You have militias themselves who will not follow the mandates of governmental directives, no matter who's in charge. And so these groups have already organized. These groups are out there. These groups have, they're growing every single day. One of the groups has at least 400,000 members, and this is of many different thousands of groups all throughout the USA. So you have all these individuals that are armed. You have all these individuals who are trained. For about the last, I say about the last 15 years, you've had specifically the last 7, you've had a lot of militia training taking place in the USA. In fact, when 2012 hit and everybody was doing the survival thing, that's when most of the resources began to float around. The armored vehicles then went to the police stations. Of course, everybody started seeing this. That's when they were beginning to train certain law enforcement individuals. Well, over the course of that time, lots of law enforcement have gotten out of law enforcement. These guys are highly trained, and they've been training. They've had training camps all throughout the USA training other people. So we essentially have multiple military armies, so to speak, within our country. It's all right here in the USA, but they have differences of opinion regarding government. And it almost broke out. And in fact, it's at a flashpoint right now. It really is at a flashpoint. Basketball, you wouldn't believe some of the tiptoeing, some of the negotiations that are taking place to keep these guys from moving on their own. For example, there's been 5 groups specifically who have been given a promise by governmental individuals so they would not make a move, because these guys no longer trust guidance from the government. They really believe that government will not act on behalf of democracy in the U.S. as they see it. Well, you have all these groups that have a difference of opinion regarding democracy. They can't agree with each other, and they are ready to they're ready to just face each other down to the death. And believe me, the tensions every hour, they're rising. They're rising and rising and rising.
Mike, so there's the militias that are forming in almost every state across the country, probably every state, and they don't trust the government. Is it they don't trust the current administration, or is it they don't trust one political party or the other, or it doesn't matter? Or are these guys part of a group that wants to do a coup on America? Or are they worried about the election? Give us an idea of who these guys are.
If you start going for the data, a lot of these guys are, I'd say at least 50% are conservative, real conservatives.
Okay.
And the problem is that conservatism, when you have a conservative group, right, and that conservative group, of course, they're going to have checks and balances they have to go through in the government. But when they start to see a brick wall where they can't really establish things in government, and then they hear, by way of their hearing, if President Trump, he has to do some sort of, he has to be bipartisan on quite a few things. But when they hear this tone coming from him, because he establishes a type of peace in this country, they don't like it. They want it to be conservatism only. They're not. You would think that they would be radical right, but they're not. They're not radical right. We're talking about people who are, some are retired, some are, a lot of them are ex-military, and they just simply see the direction this country is going. They're not blind. They can see it. They can see the morality drop. They can hear the words of Republicans and Democrats, and to be frank with you, they have lost confidence in the government. And so, but this is happening all over the U.S., but not only the U.S., it's also happening in France and Europe. They have a severe problem. They have a Islamic buildup in Europe taking place right now, and we're talking about an armed buildup. So we face some very critical moments within our countries, quite a few, but the USA, most of all the USA. So as far as radical, crazy people know, now with these protests, because you have two sides. What I'm talking to you about is the unseen, unpublished thing that's actually taking place in this country. The protest, and what you see with the protests and some of the political tools that are used with these protests, you do have groups of dissidents that have integrated within these groups that are doing all sorts of things, right? Trying to keep this protest going. But they are somewhat detached from what's going on as far as the armed individuals. And that's going to hit a flashpoint. It's almost unavoidable. And I'll say it again, you'd be surprised what the government is doing, putting out messages to these groups to keep them calm, because they were ready to move 2 weeks ago. And, quite a few policy shifts had to happen. If you listen carefully to any type of speech that's given now in this day, you're going to find that they're being very careful when they use inflammatory remarks and things of that nature. They're very cautious. Now, this is on both sides, because they know that if these groups hear the wrong words, they're going to move. They're going to move within seconds. And it's a lot of people involved. It's not just, we're not talking about people who live in the hills, right? We're talking about millionaires have funded these guys. In fact, they're to my understanding, this could be rumor, but I believe it, but there are a couple billionaires behind some of the financing of these groups. So what do we see here? We see something, while the public and everybody else is looking over to the left, something behind us is taking place, right?
So, Mike, so what you're saying is, even though we see some of these groups that have been protesting all summer, really, and but you're saying, besides these groups who are funded by a couple of billionaires, you're saying there's another groups of people who have been silent but are well-trained militias, well-armed, leaning more conservative, who are just waiting in the wings. And if anything, if something don't go right, and maybe this election is the flashpoint, it could get real ugly real fast in this country. So the government has to be preparing for this. Let me ask you a question, because it's easy. I can think of a couple of billionaires that's funding the left side. I'm not sure who the guys are funding the right, but without giving their names, maybe you'll go into more of that during the deep state uncovered, where we don't have to worry about any censorship and you can let it all fly. Is that possible?
Yeah, on the left side, things are pretty much open. I think the names float around on the internet of certain known individuals on the left, right? And that normally, the funding on the left normally goes to individuals who are crazy enough, but crafty enough to go out in these groups and organize these protests, organize the narrative of these protests, and to inflame certain situations. They are voices of chaos and not reason. But aside from all of that, Pastor Paul, we're talking about another level of things that is outside of the protests and outside of the police. We're talking about individuals who truly care for this country, right?
Yeah.
They are ready to move now. We're not talking about your people who live in the hills who've been training with paintball guns.
Right.
We're talking about the individuals who have served, officers, enlisted.
Let me ask you a question, Mike, because I have been hearing from some of my other sources that the President of the United States has had to make sure he's getting the right generals in place that he knows are with him. There was, I don't want to get too deep into this, but rumors of a coup have been out there. And is there any validity to that?
Well, I honestly don't, it looks one way on the surface. The U.S. is very fragmented right now beyond belief. It has, this is worse than if you were to read in history about the civil wars in America's past. This is far worse because it's so dangerous. We're talking about folks who are set up, folks who are embedded. We're talking about real military assets that could absolutely pledge loyalty to, some other commander that nobody ever heard of within seconds. That's a breakdown. And if people see, we're so used to things happening as we expected. I would have to say with this computer paradigm that we live in, we're so used to getting results that we want that we have forgotten about random acts. We have forgotten about things that are unaccounted for. And basically, these things that are unaccounted for, these are situations we're going to have to face. In truth, I do believe it really is so close to a flashpoint. There is no agreement with this. For example, the election, right? A lot of people have it in their heads. The new president's going to be elected right after we vote. No, it isn't. That could take 9 months. That could take a year because we're doing mail-in ballots. They're not doing the voting like they normally did back in the days, right? So to get the results of the election, to get that certified, that could take up to a year. That can actually take up to a year. Now, where would the country be, right? Just think about this scenario. If you don't have the elections certified, you've got one side that thinks their guy won. You've got the other side that thinks their guys won. And then they get out into the public with no real leadership. One side not accepting the authority of another. What do you think will happen? And this is what we're facing. And it's only days. It's only, a handful of days away. And, when this starts to begin and when they find out they're not going to get results for, a length of time, that's going to be trouble in China.
Folks, it's Mike from around the world with us. He's being very candid with us, very, very frank. And I'll tell you, Mike, I think you're on to something. We're going to move to the other question. But you have said, and I have to say something very important, and that is, this is the danger of this election. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think the other side ever accepted Trump as the president from day one of 2016. I think we've been in misery from the left, including the Congress, parts of the military leadership from the Joint Chief on down. Who knows how many have just they had the Russia collusion, confusion. We went through an impeachment. There's been the FBI director had a coup going on with some people. It's been insane. And I think you're right, but it's nothing compared to what could happen in this one. And that's what you're warning us about, that all hands are on deck. We're at the brink of something really ugly, and we need to pray, is what I'm hearing Mike say.
Yeah, a couple days ago, Pastor, a couple days ago, it almost began. It really almost began a couple days ago. And that was a very long day indeed. And people that, one point I have to make here, people were oblivious to it. Yeah. It's almost like they can't discern these subjects like that type of mindset is just not in a saint to ever think that way. So folks, we still have to be aware that 10-day period is going on right now, which means that 10th day is going to be this day, every single day, until this trouble is taken care of. And I don't think it will be. I just don't think it will be. In fact, I'm almost 100% confident it won't be taken care of, and something will come about from this. I know it seems like we're living in a dream, but on another point, Pastor, I would have to say this: when Trump was elected, I really didn't worry too much. Here's why. God appoints leaders, no matter who they are, and they serve their purpose, right? Right. So they carry out God's commands and what he wants in his existence, regardless. Right. And it's true. Now, but we, on the other hand, we just can't relax in our lawn chairs and stop praying, because that's one of our number one spiritual weapons. And I'd like to inform people that everything in existence is about to go from this reality we've been in for a long time to almost 100% spiritual, which means that's a lot of manifestations. That means all those hidden elements that we never dealt with, people are going to have to deal with them. And that's when you're going to find out certain people can't pray at all. Certain people have no faith at all, because when they're confronted by true evil, which they will be confronted by, that's just not going to be a good day. Spiritual authority is going to be very important. In fact, isn't there a place in the Bible where it says a person or try to cling to a person who is a believer just for protection, just to say, let me carry your last name so that I'm not stuck out there without. They're going to try and find Christians, but the Bible says they'll scarcely be able to. They're going to look for Christians, but they won't find too many. Things are changing.
Even Jesus said that faith, will I come, will I find any faith left? Mike, let's talk about something. There's the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, finally, I mean, we've been hearing this, the rumors, there's been some speculation, but he came out and said it now that I asked you last week, what's the three most dangerous things we're facing? You said Russia, China, and you never gave us the third. Well, here's the article just came out. Moscow, Beijing have weaponized space through killer satellites, directed energy weapons, according to the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. And he says that China and Russia have weaponized space through killer satellites and have directed energy weapons designed to exploit and weaken the U.S. military. The Department of Defense sees its adversaries advancing their military technologies, and so it's doubling down on them. Mike, can you help me understand? And could it be that, because we heard that maybe Russia had fired down laser beams from satellites and started the fires in California? Is there anything to that? What's going on? Are we at a disadvantage here?
The USA? Yeah, because we're I'll say it again. Sometimes, when you're on top too long, you can easily get out of shape, right? You can't. If you're not hungry enough, you're not going to move around enough, you can get out of shape. And then you can live under a type of delusion thinking that you can handle everything. And the countries that are starving hungry, they're the ones that are innovative. Most of our technology right now is not invented, nor is conceived in the USA. And that's very sad. The same laser system that our Navy has, that they stuck out in the middle of the ocean, China did that in less than 2 weeks and stuck it on the back of a truck. So that same expensive laser, even the one we have deployed in the Middle East that's been tested for the last 28 years, China had already perfected that type laser system, and they were trying to get the parts. Of course, that was a bit dispersed through a flight that went down, but because intellectual property was lost and the blueprints couldn't go forward from there. But China is very advanced, extremely advanced, and they can replicate just about anything. The USA is more of a manager of intellectual property, meaning that we get the greatest minds all over the world. We work with them, and then we produce, goods and services based in kind. Russia is extremely smart. That's why we were using their spaceships to get into space. Publicly, they were like that.
Yeah, but didn't Obama kill the NASA program and just kill it and just said, "Hey, we're just,
Actually, there's if people are thinking that the NASA program being killed was some thing just to get something else done, that's incorrect. That began back in the Clinton years, and it's not that NASA was ever destroyed. NASA was forced to change. It was forced to alter, was forced to agree with Russia by another party. So the USA was forced to do what they did with another party. As Christians, I know this is going to sound nuts, but as Christians, we always have to remember that all the nations have visitation. All of them do. Some of the people out there probably listening to your show, they know this. They're probably saying, "Oh, don't go there." So, but all the countries have advisements. And sometimes advisements come down so strong that they have no choice but to cooperate. Without these other individuals who do step in from time to time, countries would not cooperate. They just wouldn't do it, but they're forced to. That was more of a cooperation, is what happened, because they were forced to. If you remember, the same time we lost our shuttle program, our defense mainframes were going down just about every single week. We were defenseless for an entire month, and nobody talked about it. Nobody knew it. Everybody kept that hush hush, and it was, those were dangerous days, because we also lost our space defense. It was gone, and then all of a sudden, when we start working together again, it's almost like somebody took the lock off the computer systems. Our systems, no matter how complex around the world, can be shut down just like that. So never think that mankind can overstep its bounds. And there is a part where man is given room to do what he wants to do. And then, but God will only let him go so far. Those are going to be drastic days for the world. But they were forced to do that.
Mike, let me ask you: do they have the technology? Does Russia and China have the ability to start wildfires?
Yes,
are they doing it, Mike?
Yes, they do. Pastor, it's this simple. The type of lasers that they use, right? The type of lasers that they use, they could initialize one of those satellites, and within about a couple of seconds, it's done. Just like that. Then it's off, it's done. They're super cool because they're out there in space. The same laser system you cannot run from the surface of Earth because the temperatures are too warm. Even with nitrogen, you don't have enough to circulate through a system to keep it cold like that. So in space, you have temperatures that are below, 200 degrees, which can keep it really cool. That's superconductive guidance systems or high-speed particle direction for these guns. CERN, the magnets, again, one of the most powerful defense weapons on the face of the earth. That collaborative cooperation, it just so happens that the magnets made for CERN now sit in the Pacific Ocean. They also sit in the Atlantic Ocean. And President Trump had deployed these things because they are a defensive measure. The only thing that can stop a laser is a magnet. Think about it. Now the Middle East right now, right, with the F-35s going over there, that's not really a problem, by the way. All the weaponry in the Middle East right now is about to be refitted with lasers. Why? Because Iran came out with a tank that is a laser tank, and it actually works. And so Russia and Iran are one and the same. Remember that. So you just can't sweep Iran under the carpet. That's not going to happen. Saudi Arabia, don't get used to it because it's playing two roles, and eventually it's not going to be on the earth, period. That's going to be a wasteland.
You have been saying that consistently now for
it's going to be a wasteland.
For like 3 or 4 years. I mean, you're and really, it's quite remarkable, to be honest with you, because we've and I'm going to go back all the way to Daddy Bush. Okay, let's go all the way back to Daddy Bush. From Daddy Bush on, America has pumped a ton of money into Saudi Arabia by purchasing the oil, which we now know we never needed to do because we got enough of it in Texas. But are we going to kind of ease away from Saudi Arabia? Are they going to be left standing there on their own 2 feet and can't defend themselves?
Well, Bahrain, which was also in the these new agreements, let's call them corporate agreements. Bahrain was involved strictly because of their strategic position regarding oil, right? That's for Bahrain. The rest of them are for an actual Middle Eastern alliance that is forming. And if that can be solidified, the idea is you can force out some of the negative Arab states that would cause problems in the Middle East, stopping a wealth of product from coming out of the Middle East. So they're trying to change this. Of course, we know what actually happens. They form an alliance, and that alliance has a Western influence. And we're going to become the last ally of Israel. But something is going to happen that will isolate Israel. So, the Bible prophecy is going to be prophecy. And this alliance had to form because now the enemies of the alliance are conversating. They're conversating right now, and they have an agreement coming out. In less than 14 days, there will be papers signed with the negative alliance. So people will be witnesses to something extraordinary.
Do you look for that? Is that going to be like Russia, Iran, maybe Turkey, and some other nations?
It'll be the unholy alliance led by, it'll be those who forsake the Holy Covenant, basically those who don't like Israel. They don't like Western influence. They feel they've been undercut. Hamas has also been talking to them. Now, Hamas is like the tiniest little group out there, right? But you wouldn't believe how their cries have really touched these other countries. And now these guys they're just, the Middle East, the paradigm of the Middle East is changing so incredibly quick that people should keep their eyes open, because what they're looking for, we may think we're going to entertain that, but I believe it's going to be obstructed fairly quickly. Turkey, Pakistan, India is within question now, because India is losing patience with the U.S. They're losing patience with us. Keep in mind that India's wealth line continues to decline. They have an issue with China. China is starting to become a heavy problem over there. And the U.S. has not made any direct intervention because we've been focused on other things. Well, India is taking offense to that. And the only reason they're quiet now is because, we still have some pretty good ties with them, pretty good relations, but it's falling apart left and right. The more we are distracted here in America, Democrat and Republican, because they can't get their act together, international relationships are going to fall apart. I'll tell you one last thing about the Middle East too, Pastor Paul. I'm telling you, I have to say this again, I do not trust Jordan. I don't trust Jordan. And I think that, I'm not the only one, but I'm just voicing that publicly. When you have Jordan in the middle of things like that, they're going to pose a direct issue, a direct problem. But by the time people find this out, it's going to be too late.
Do you think? Well, as part of that, where they could cause some issues is, they have a peace deal with Israel that's been standing since '94, but they're in charge of the Temple Mount. And that's still going to be a sticky thing when the Israelis want to build that third temple. Don't you think that's when Jordan raises an ugly head?
Well, here's one issue, Pastor. There's just one thing, and I only say this because I overheard two conversations when I was in Israel. One of them was an honest conversation, right? The normal conversation about the temple and some of the exercises, some of the mocked exercises and mocked sacrifices that have been taking place in Israel for the last 15, 16, 20 years, right? Because they have put everything together to the clothing and everything else. They just don't have the temple. They have been, everybody's been in training. But what I did over here, that was those who are in Israel, but they're against Israel, right?
Yes.
Was that they would be responsible, right, for the orchestration of the temple, which means erecting it. And as soon as they get the temple built and all that land as it was, right? Yeah. They would then hand it over, because who's involved in this? The Muslims are involved in this. Jordan is involved in this. Jordan is a security hand in the Middle East. That's what Jordan is. Jordan acts as security in the Middle East for both Saudi Arabia. They're also the intellectual center, but they are, above all things, they are devout to Muhammad. right? They are devout Islamists, and that is the core, the center of the knowledge basis right there. They're responsible for the institutes and everything else, and they have a vow with Turkey, and they have a vow with Iran, and they have a vow with all these other places. You wouldn't even believe it. But they're also brothers, and so they won't let, even the senators, and everybody knows, they won't let Western influence in but so far, because they believe it's a family issue, right? They have a right to kill their brother. If their brother is an offense to God, they have a right to remove him. So they still think they have a right to remove Israel. That's part of the complication. But Jordan itself is not going to remain faithful. And now, because we have ties with the UAE, because over in the Middle East there's a tie with the UAE and Israel, Jordan is going to become a little upset about that, about a few things. In fact, to my knowledge, they already are. They're going to withdraw a couple of things next week when they're signing an agreement that counters the agreement that was signed this week. So we'll see all this in action.
Yes. Folks, Mike from Around the World's with us, Council of Time. Mike's been a consistent, wonderful guest with us for the last 8 years, I think, and it's been incredible, the information he's told us over the years that have come to pass. Appreciate the fact he does get a chance to see some stuff before it gets released, and it's really been helpful to the body of Christ. Speaking of these things, Mike, we want to talk about Hurricane Sally for a minute, because, you told us about 2 years ago, watch for storms to start stalling. We had Harvey, but there's been several storms that have stalled, and now Sally stalled and dropped 3 foot of rain. It was coming right along, and then all of a sudden stops. Is this weather modification going on, Mike, or is this the 5 waves of energy? Is this the gravitational pull? Is this the atmospheric compression you've been talking about? What's going on here?
Oh, it's not man-made. This is external. This is absolutely external. If you could, the other day they had the lowest pressure they had ever recorded since they have started recording. The lowest pressure in one of these storms. They never dreamed they would ever see pressure drop that low, but it did. And that implies that atmospheric compression, which is a term, right? I'll say it again, I coined that term to explain a process that the atmosphere will begin to condense.
Yeah.
And we call it atmospheric compression. That's going to be adopted. That'll be utilized and kind of put out there. People will start utilizing that term because there's no other way to explain what's happening in the atmosphere without spilling the beans. And nobody's going to spill the beans because many people know about the process of what's happening to the earth. They can't speak about it because it's not something that's easily observable. Right? And when you can't easily observe a process of change, even if it destroys you, that you can't disclose it like that.
Well, we
right?
can't see.
That keeps people calm.
We can't see Planet X. The mathematical equations say there's got to be something huge, large, unseen, because it's probably too far outside our solar system that our sun doesn't reflect off it. But it's the gravitational pull. It's affecting us, but we can't see it. And it's.
Of course it is. It's almost like reverse time-lapse photography, right? We see everything moving so slow, but to us it's fast. But if you could take time and compress it and show time over the course of years, everybody would get the picture. They would say the weather phenomena is unnatural and our atmosphere is doing some wicked things, and so is the sun. So our Earth is swelling and it's also warping. The atmosphere is condensing. It's becoming heavier, which is pushing these storms that we're having. They will double in size within the next, if we continue this way, they'll double in size within the next year and a half.
What?
Probably shorter, but they'll double in size.
Whoa. Double in size, Mike. Yes. Double in size.
Well, is that so hard to believe? You remember back in, I think it was before I met you, I did a small talk, and I was talking about storms doubling in size, and here we are, 2020, where storms have doubled in size. And so what we have is a exponential event taking place. It's only going to get worse, but it's not man-made, because the same thing is also happening on Mars. It's very important that they continue to send probes to Mars to monitor the changes in Mars so that we can see what we're doing and what we're not doing. What's happening to us is happening solar system wide, and of course we can't just jump to another planet to verify that, so they won't tell anybody. But we're going to face greater and greater storms, and these stalled systems, these stalled low pressure systems, that's going to become worse to where they become stagnant. Not only stalled, but stagnant. And this is where the mildew issue is going to take place. But with heavier or denser atmosphere, breathing problems. You know, my heart goes out to anybody who has breathing problems right now. My advice to them would be to make sure you exercise your lungs, because you're going to have to get used to very different pressures. That in conjunction with more and more fires on the surface of the earth. I think that's something. Well, that's something that people don't include. When you deal with weather phenomena and you introduce smoke, right, from fires, that means our atmosphere is going to become quite windy in certain areas, and condense even more. And with all the debris coming inbound, we're guaranteed to have greater and greater fires. Debris. And so people who have issues breathing, they're going to have to really start to take their breathing serious, right? Take it serious. And I would advise anybody, if you have breathing problems, you're on oxygen, please stop smoking. That's not going to help you. Just stop while you can. Do it while you can, because we're going to face very bad atmospheric conditions. That will continue to increase. Now, the winter is going to give us some sort of relief, but we know the winter is not going to last long. If we can make it out of the winter, because I'm not sure whether it was last winter, this winter, or the next winter, but one of the winters we go through, Pastor Ball, is going to be, it's just not going to be good, because of disease and because of debris and disease is going to be an issue with us, and that's going to be something we're going to have to face.
Is the debris bringing the disease? I mean, I know radiation. I mean, you keep talking about debris. You're talking about a lot of brimstone, a lot of little meteorites, and then it's going to get to a point. I've heard you say this before. That there's no more hiding this. Okay,
that's right.
So, is it bringing the disease with it, or is China going to release something?
It will exacerbate what happens on Earth. Imagine this, Pastor Paul. Imagine every single week, every single day of the week, you get a few people who die from impacts every single day.
What?
Imagine every single day there's property damage or something of that sort. This is what we're going to entertain. Now, you're talking about large-scale fires. California would be small-scale, speaking in terms of this, because these things, they would be almost impossible to put out. And the Bible itself even tells us that, all the green grass is going to burn up. All of it. It didn't say some of it, all of it. And if you, looking at that, 1/3 of the trees burn up, all the green grass, if you start looking at a map and find out where the trees are on the surface of the earth, that pretty much means the trees are gone, because the coverage percentage of foliage, if you find out where it is, and then you take a percentage of that away, you'll just say wow to yourself. You'll see a clear indication around the globe that we're going to be in bad straits.
Let's read that, Mike. Let's read that real quick here. It's Revelation chapter 8. Folks, we got over 5,100 people with us on our YouTube channel, and I don't know how many on the backup, probably 1,000. There's a lot of folks out there. Let me just say, here's what he's saying. In Revelation chapter 8, it says in verse 6, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. So you're saying here comes phase 1, debris coming upon the earth as it's being shaken loose out there ahead of the asteroids that there's 2 clumps. You've been telling us, Mike, 2 huge clumps of asteroids that are kind of like going to be on either side of Jupiter. We can kind of see them way out there with the Hubble. So tell me, so we're getting ready to hit this wave, and it's not going to ease up. It's just going to get worse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And you know what? Most of the green grass, where is it? Is it in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere? Where do you think it is?
Southern. Southern?
It's in the northern hemisphere. And what that means is because we have a lot of desert regions, right? In America, 59% of America is a green region, right? The rest is desert. In South America, just about the entire continent of South America is grass. So that accounts in South America just for a part. But when you go to Africa, 50% of Africa is desert. Just about 90% of the Middle East is desert. Russia has a larger percentage, but that's in the northern hemisphere. So if you take away all the green grass, you know what you have left? The trees in that area account for 1/3 of all the trees on the earth. If you took those areas where the green grass is, you burn it up, that's 1/3 of the trees that are gone, just like that. And when you look on a mapping, you find out where all this grass is, because South America and Africa only account for I believe it's 37% of all the grass of the earth. The rest is in the northern hemisphere. That means the northern hemisphere is going to get the brunt of the impact of this thing. And if that is since that is the case, if all the green grass is burnt up there, then the northern hemisphere, being that ignition point, or whatever you want to call it, is going to become largely uninhabitable, decline in populace and everything else, because we have a chemical problem in the northern hemisphere. And when you know it, all the simulations work out. We once thought that South America would be an impact zone. Wrong. Because of the way we're moving, right? Because of the way we're rotating. And they just confirmed this because of the two of the satellites that went beyond Jupiter's range enough to see by laser some accurate readings. The modeling is coming out different concerning how we move. We move in a way that they got it all wrong, let's put it that way, which puts our northern hemisphere as like a helmet, right? The northern hemisphere is like a helmet. So the grunt of the stuff is going to smack us right in the helmet. That's the northern hemisphere. So everybody will run as southern-wise to get there. Now, funny thing about Israel. Israel is so funny. Israel sits at a strong magnetic point on the earth. But the depiction of Israel, unless you're looking at it from a satellite, is so far out of proportion you can't really see where it is. Israel is in a null zone, is where it is. So if these things begin to happen on the face of the earth, even external things, which they will happen, Israel has almost a natural barrier that will take effect from it. Just a natural barrier. And but we're going to entertain some problems. That build-up in debris is you know what? They actually admitted in California, I believe it was, somebody will have to go back and find the tape, but there were witnesses. They saw two objects, two small, little, tiny objects. One was burning real bright, then it dimmed out, and as soon as it hit the ground, a small, plume started out there in California. Okay. Now, we know one was started by pyrotechnics, but they saw another one come in, and it lit up real bright, and then it dimmed out. But they saw it continue straight to the surface and poof, they said they saw a little plume there. So I would say that some of the fires that we're seeing on the earth, because there are a lot of fires right now, some of these fires are actually being confirmed to be started by things that have fallen to the face of the earth. And this came about due to insurance reasons and due to investigations. A lot of witnesses were saying that very same thing, that, something lit up real big in the sky, went away, and then it hit the ground and kapoof. But they also have fires in Russia right now. By the same thing is happening. Of course, they have permafrost, which will put out the fires, don't burn as much like California. California is a tinderbox. And it's also a warning. But more and more of this stuff will face, which is going to make it it's just going to make it hard to breathe for quite a few people. Even right now, the air quality has gone down a pretty good percentage on the East Coast from the fires in the West Coast. And I'm not sure if people notice that or not, but it certainly is a measurable difference. And so people should really watch what they're, certainly if they're, I'll say it again, if you're smoking, try to quit now. They're going to change chemicals anyway. But try to quit now. Before you're forced to stop.
Well, you talked about this about 4 years ago, I believe, maybe 5 years ago. You said there's a day coming that we're going to be living in where everyone's got to wear a gas mask. I remember you said first we'll be wearing masks and then we'll be wearing a gas mask. Well, we are wearing the mask now. That's for sure. It's happening. We're wearing the mask for other reasons, but I guess as this atmospheric disturbance takes place, as the incoming debris begins to pepper the earth and hit the earth, and as more fires and smoke begin and more people are being killed, and folks are going to be asking a lot of questions, Mike. They're going to be asking a lot of questions. Does Elon Musk, is he been brought into the forefront now with these huge massive government contracts to start working toward a colony on Mars pretty feverishly now? They're upping the date, the Starship, everything, they're getting ready. Do you see that? Is that partly part of the scripture where it says men will climb into the heavens, but God said, I will bring you back down, and there's some will be hiding in the rocks and the mountains to try to hide from the face of the Lord, but they'll finally cry for the rocks to crush them from the face of the Lord. I mean, are we living in that period right now?
I think that as far as men going out into space, they've been off-world for a time now. Elon Musk being on the public side is also protected by conservatism, because when Donald Trump took office, he's not following the protocol all the secrecy stuff. He's just not behind it, and so certain people are protected right now. Even the subjects that are talked about right now, people ought to talk about them right now, because I guarantee you it's going to be a clampdown, another clampdown very quickly.
Let me ask you, Mike, because I'm getting ready to interview Laura Eisenhower. Now, she's the great-granddaughter of the 34th President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And she has publicly said that the United States government recruited her to be part of a secret space program to go to Mars. That she could have went to Mars. She could already be there right now. That there is already a space program on Mars. I'm going to be interviewing her for the deep state. I'm going to dig into that one, plus her great grandfather's meeting with the aliens or whatever happened out there, and I'm going to try to dig some of that out. It is a deep state, but is Laura Eisenhower, in your opinion, is she telling us actually, is there such a thing as a secret space agency that she was recruited for?
Well, here's the issue, Fastball. If it were right now, nobody could prove that for or against either way. So still going to be a statement people have to take by the credibility of the individual, which is problematic within itself. Right now, nobody's going to come and present clear evidence for that. There are things established up there, of course there are, but
on Mars,
is that provable? Well, with even some of the there's on the internet right now, because it'll be scrubbed, there are comical pictures of things, right? You'd be surprised. I'll give you something before they pull it, because this might alter something. On the internet, everybody listen to me. On the internet, if you want to find out something real, attach comedy to your search bar, okay? Something funny, a picture of something funny, okay? That's all you have to do. Because in most cases, what they'll do is they'll take something very real and make it comical, present it to the world. And then, they because they're so egotistical and they like to laugh at people and show how dumb people are, they make, comedic movies and things of that nature out of truth. People can see that with there was a movie called Airplane. If you go back and look at that movie, certain things were discussed that we entertain right now, not back then. Secrets have been divulged that same way, and they just laugh at people is what they do. But they're doing this. It's not that they're supernatural or any way. They're the ones coming up with all this stuff, and they introduce it in a way that makes it laughable to everybody else, and they also make it distasteful. So when somebody says, something is established on Mars, one of the first things that hit your mind is the programming. Education. All of us have been educated to be experts on what does not exist. Here's the issue with that, right? In order for a person to say what does not exist, they must know everything that does exist. That should let you know right there, you're programmed to believe that certain things don't exist. And we're also programmed to scoff at things that we can't that don't fit the paradigm of evolution. I hate to say this, but even though we're children of faith, we still have evolution as one of our anchor points when we start discussing what is real and what is not, like aliens. Every Christian should know what an alien actually is. Right. That they do a lot of wordplay. Extraterrestrial means not from Earth. In truth, God is not from Earth. He created the Earth. Jesus is not from Earth. Nobody in the heavens is from the Earth. The Earth was created, so all of them are extraterrestrial. But back a long time ago, there's simply the fallen angels, the ones that did not keep their first estate. They were cast here on the earth. They made it with women. They had offspring. Their children were known as evil spirits, this, that, and the other. So all this stuff is in the earth, and they still do that today. They're still alive today. There's certain flesh and blood, fallen beings right here on this earth today. And they run the tribes in these remote areas, and they're underground. They still have underground facilities and everything else. Some of them are asleep, and they stink. They smell sour and everything else. But that's just where they are.
What? Well, you're right,
but
Mike.
They're alive today.
You're right, Mike. I mean, they're demons. They're fallen angels. They're of course. And you're right. And so what's happened is the world wants to change the narrative by changing the terminology, saying the word aliens, extraterrestrial, other beings, that kind of stuff. So they change the terminology, but the truth is they are the fallen ones, the Rephahims, Nephilims, the demons, and we can call them whatever we want, but that's really what they are. You're right, exactly. And they're not done, are they, Mike?
No, they're still at work. You have very few that. Well, you have some of them right now, Pastor Paul, that they're in bodies, right? So they're not spiritual. But the other half that are spiritual, the ones that are disembodied, that have no bodies, and that's what they do every day. They take genetic tissue from us, they mix it with themselves to make bodies for the other spirits that are roaming the earth, right? So they make vessels that a demon can possess, and believe me, that number's gone up beyond belief. Anyway, that's a pretty long story.
Well, let me throw something out there, because I'll tell you something. The Vatican has said that the number of exorcisms that they are performing is by far like 10 times more a year than they used to do 10 years ago. They said there's more people walking around that are absolutely beyond. I mean, we're talking about people, Mike, that the psychiatrist and psychologists are sending to the priest, calling the Vatican saying, you got to take this person. This is not psychology. So we really are seeing an increase of demonology, aren't we? And demons.
We're seeing it, pure manifestation, Pastor Paul, because, I've never seen a time when these things can walk with such boldness. I mean, just flat out straight daytime manifestation. At the same time demons manifest, people see UFOs at a higher count. They go hand in hand because they're one in the same. And they rearrange the concepts of mankind. They want people to get that wondery ooh-ah feeling, because we don't know, but that's called worship. Because once somebody voluntarily looks at these things and desires to see them, that's called worship. And if you desire to see them and you get that good feeling from them, you're no longer worshiping the Lord your God. But we were warned of this, and this is happening. And once a person starts going down that road, it's very difficult to pull them back. Anyway, that's what they are, Pastor Paul. You have some in bodies, that they're in bodies right now. Yep. You can hardly tell the difference, but they smell sour. But you can hardly tell the difference. And then you have some that are disembodied. These are the demons and everything else. But the ones with bodies, they're kind. They work just about everywhere, right? But they're so corrupted on the inside. Women are natural antennas to these things. I'll put that out there. Why do you think Satan never talked to Adam in the garden? He talked to Eve, right? As far as in every single book that you can look in, he talked to the woman, because the woman is able to hear, right? They're able to discern these spiritual voices that are going around. They just have to be careful which one they listen to, but they're able to discern it. Right? Men, they're not going to pay attention to stuff like that. That's not. We're directive orientated. Women are more environmentally orientated, so they question everything. What was that? What is this? What's this feel like? Why did he do that? What is this? So they can hear spiritual voices. They have to be careful which ones they entertain. But evils like that, and women today, they can tell when something's not right with somebody. Right? Yeah. I guarantee you just about half the women in the chat room were in a grocery store somewhere else, and they said, I got to get away from this person. And they walked away, and they don't even know why. But they were highly repulsed, and they knew something was wrong.
Well, they can sense danger. They can sense danger. They have to be that way, because they probably won't have the physical ability to overtake the danger. So they have to be more aware, more astute, more on top of it. You're exactly right. And they're more emotional, they're more touchy-feely, and thus they have ability to sense things quicker than men will. Men blow past stuff, ignore stuff, can't hear, selective hearing, whatever, knuckleheads. I mean, we're a little tougher to deal with. And so you're right. They have a more sensitivity to this. I think intuition's a really good word. Thank you. Mike, before we let you go, I know, man, I tell you what, you've been on a roll tonight. Tell us, you have really been on a roll tonight. I got to rethink this whole thing again. Tell us, what is the bomb you're going to drop? Of course, you're going to be one of the keynote speakers in Deep State, but what kind of bomb are you going to leave me with tonight?
You know, Pastor Paul, I know the elections are around the corner, right?
Right.
I tell you, people ought to be prayerful about your neighborhoods. And what I mean by that is people will begin to notice almost a type of wave of evil that will come through neighborhoods. And people are at their breaking point, Pastor Paul. Let me give you an example. It's distasteful, but let me give you this. There are too many cases of children who are 10 years old and younger who have killed their grandparents. Right? And I've been noticing that number's increasing. This world is turning very dark, and we can't lose our position now, right? God made us to stand upright in this very time, in the time of trouble. I can also say this, that we were born with knowledge of Christ. Nobody had to tell us about Christ. We already knew about Christ. We knew he existed. And just to tell all your listeners this one thing, can I tell them?
Yes.
That the Bible says God put a belief of his son in you so that his son will never lose you. That's why you believe in the Bible maybe a bit strongly, differently than everybody else in your family, because you were called above everybody else in your family. But the Lord put you right in the middle of trouble so you can make a change to that trouble. He never stuck you in this pretty camp where you can do no work. And it's time to stand up and do the work. And the work is where all the ruckus is. He made us to be lamps in the darkness. We are made to go out into the darkness. Why? Because it doesn't matter how dark it is, Pastor Paul. If you take a flashlight and you turn it on, you have light. No matter how dark it is, a tiny light will shed light on everything it touches. And that's what the Lord made us. Not to cower in the darkness, but to stand up in his truth. And we're going to have to know that. I mean, really know that, certainly in these trying times to come. Our citizens against citizens. We actually face a time when citizens hate citizens yet again. And we're not talking about racism. Forget about racism. They want you to think it's about racism, but I suggest it's something much deeper, and racism is one of the excuses used for this deeper dissidence. So we have to really start paying attention to scriptures. More pastors like you, Pastor Paul, we got to pay attention. We have to actually hear, because this is our time to stand up. The Lord has given us all this time. He prepared us biblically through examples with all the weird stuff and the good stuff and the bad stuff and all this stuff. He has trained us, and now it's time to take everything we have learned and stand up and begin to utilize it for the sake of our neighbor. He didn't put us here for ourselves. He put us here for somebody else, to make a difference in somebody else's life. And what does the Bible say, Pastor Paul? Everybody who's entered into Christ has ceased from their own labors. Right. So that means you're not doing what you want to do anymore. You're doing that mission of the Lord that he put in your heart when you were a little baby, when you comprehended biblical things and nobody taught you a thing, right?
That's right.
I'm sure that everybody remembers that who were called of the Lord. They knew, and revelation was sown into them. Yes, they tried to ignore it, be normal like everybody else. Folks, don't ever make that mistake and be normal. Be exactly who the Lord made you to be, and continue to grow in the Lord, because now that you are needed, not the who was that guy they gave away in the Bible? They hid him over in the corner. Oh, we don't know this guy. Yeah. We did the same thing with our own personalities. We hid the person God sent here to earth, and what do? We acted to be like everybody else. Well, take that person and throw him away, that person that God sent here. Allow that person to stand up. That's the real you, not the one that understands science so well. You're just one of these etiquette individuals, but the one who is bound in faith and always in faith, the one that understands revelation, and the one that won't cower away from these weird conversations, because Satan is behind most of this weirdness. But we need that. We need those standing individuals, the real children of the living God. This is that time right now. This is that time.
It is time to stand up. up. You're exactly right, Mike. Be that light in the darkness. Pierce through it in the name of Jesus. Mike, thank you so much. Want to have you back next Thursday night. We're getting closer. I'll see you next Thursday.
All right, Pastor Paul. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you, Mike.